All right, well, welcome everyone to our webinar, the Writing Your Statement of Purpose webinar. My name is Michaela. I'm the founder and co-owner of GC Prep, and I'm just really excited that you guys are here because any even little tidbit that you can gain from this webinar, even if it's only one thing, is going to make your paper stronger. And if you're able to apply a lot of these elements, you're going to end up with a paper that you feel really proud of and really confident in. So we have material to go over today, guidance on how to do these things, how to get started. But there's like a ton of nuance and detail that we don't have time to get into for everyone, of course, because everybody's coming to this application process a little bit differently. You all have different backstories. You all have different strengths, which is all wonderful things. And so we'll talk about like the general, how to approach this, what they're really looking for, how to think about your experiences and pull out what the most important parts are. And then we'll talk about how to get additional help if you feel like you need to, have some guidance that's really specific to you. We'll do a question and answer period at the end. But if you have any questions like in the moment, put them in the chat, and Coach Jess is also here, and so she can kind of field some of those questions as we do it. Okay, so let's get started here. All right, so here are our goals, right? What are the schools actually looking for in your essay? How to brainstorm your ideas, how to pick a core idea or a core theme that you want a school to know about you, how to select a framework for your paper, how to describe your experiences effectively, how to start and end your paper with a bang. And then if we have time, we'll get into Coach Jess's value exercise there at the end, okay? So what do schools want? This is a question that applicants spend a long time agonizing over. Like, what are they actually looking for? And the short version is they just want to know who you are, right? So each program seat, each spot at a school is an extremely precious resource to the field of genetic counseling. And so they are trying to make sure that they're only giving those seats to people who seem most likely to succeed and thrive as a genetic counselor, right? And so what does that all mean, right? So we want to make sure that you write a paper that you feel proud of and that represents the true you, because they can't know if you're going to be a good fit for the field of genetic counseling. And if they want to take that investment in you to educate you and get you through this program, and release you into the wild of genetic counseling, if you don't have the personality for it or the value system for it or the aptitude, right? So many of you, most of you do. It's just a matter of being able to communicate that through your paper. That is super important. And that skill of being able to communicate it through your paper is a genetic counseling skill, because a lot of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is writing material that is highly comprehensible and easy to understand to other people, right? So this is kind of like your first test of can you communicate through writing effectively? Can you tell me who you are and why you want to be here and why you'd be good at it? Okay? What are the problems, right? Lots of schools have quite vague prompts, which means that a lot of the papers coming back to them are quite vague, right? And that's not a way to get noticed, right? Writing to what you think they want to hear will lead to unsatisfactory outcomes for you. It's not going to get you a whole lot of interviews. Authentic papers are way more interesting for them to read, way more easy for them to remember who you are. It's easier to get them interested in knowing more about you, to have them enthusiastic to see you on the interview list. And that's what we're shooting for. We want someone at that program to be like, whoa, did you hear about so-and-so? I read their paper and I just really want to meet them, right? Even if grades maybe weren't that good, but their paper was just so compelling. I really want to meet them in person and see what they're doing. And so you're moving from a point of like neutrality where, yeah, the paper was fine and GPA looks good and, all the criteria are met, so let's interview them, to someone who's actively enthusiastic to meet you in interviews. That's what you're going for. Okay? So what do schools really want to know? Who are you as a person? What that means is, what are your passions? What are your motivations? How do you think? What's your learning styles? Can you be authentic, right? Can you be open and vulnerable? They want to know, why are you ready to be a genetic counselor, right? So are you showing the emotional processing skills? Are you showing the like critical thinking and analytical skills that someone needs to be a genetic counselor? And this is a key point, okay? You could have applied to genetic counseling schools in the past and had the potential to be a genetic counselor, but you weren't quite ready yet because you hadn't quite developed those critical thinking or emotional processing skills. Doesn't mean you wouldn't be a great GC in the future, but you weren't quite ready, right? And so what we're trying to show them in this paper is that you are ready now to enter the field, okay? We also want to show them, why do you want to go to that particular program, okay? The reality is that many schools are quite similar in what they're offering, right? They all have to have the same core type of rotations. Sometimes they have a few extra ones that are bonuses. They have to have like the core education, the core classes. And so in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter where you go in a lot of circumstances. And you might not even feel super strongly about where you go. You just want to get into a program, and that's fine. But schools still want to know, right? Schools still want to know, why are you picking us? What is important about us that you like? And it's not aspects of their curriculum that are different than any other school, right? That's not what they're looking for. They want to know, what about their program is good for you. And you can't describe what is good for you and works well for you and what interests you if you haven't gotten across who you are as a person and what things you find important, right? So we're going to talk about all of that in more detail, but that is kind of the overview of what we're trying to do with the guidance that we're giving here in this webinar, okay? And click, there we go. Why should you trust us on this, right? Because I am sitting in my house, some rando you guys don't know. Why trust us? We've done 3 match cycles so far. This will be our 4th one. And last year, the national average for getting an interview of people who applied was 55%, but people who were coached in the fall, meaning GC Prepped helped them with their documents, 84% of those matched, okay? So about a 30% increase in your likelihood of getting interviews. If you don't get interviews, you're done for the year, right? So you must get interviews to move on to the next step to be considered for matching. So we don't want you to be part of that almost 50% that gets eliminated before interview time. We want you to get in front of them. We want you to be able to show more of your, how do you do on the fly? How do you handle questions? What would it kind of be like if you were in a session with a patient? That's what they're assessing in interviews. We want you guys to get there, okay? If we look at our last 3 years altogether, it's about 87% of people who engaged in the fall that got interviews, okay? So this is highly effective, right? It's not 100% because we can't control what your letters of recommendation look like or your GPA or, you know, if you have all of your prerequisites, like we don't have control over those things. So there are other reasons besides your paper why someone would not get interviewed, but submitting an excellent paper can make up for less than stellar performance in other areas of your application, right? So this paper is really your best chance to grab their interest. And I don't want that to intimidate you. I want you guys to be excited about getting who you are out on paper and how to proceed, okay? So let's talk about how to do that. First of all, we need to brainstorm about your experiences. And we have a whole video on brainstorming your ideas and writing your statement of purpose. It is 45 minutes long and it gets super in-depth. So we can't go that in-depth today, but I would highly recommend watching that video and doing the brainstorming exercises in detail so that you can really dive down deep into everything that you have done in preparation for this application process. Okay. So first, we need to identify your experiences. So these are experiences that have truly inspired you to pursue a career in genetic counseling. They could be personal or professional. They don't necessarily have to be genetics or medicine related. If they are, super, right? That's fine. If they're not, that's okay, right? There's a lot of skills that genetic counselors use, like their empathy and supporting autonomy and being non-judgmental and advocating, that are applied in many different areas outside of genetics and medicine. So it doesn't have to be that you're only sharing experiences related to genetics or the medical field. Okay. We want to talk about anything that was truly impactful for you and why. Okay. We do want to touch on any times that you had a leadership opportunity, advocacy work, providing or receiving support. If you personally went through a grief process or observed someone else going through a grief process and what that was like we want to consider both our successes and our failures. And why did they turn out the way that they did, right? What were the gears working in that experience to cause it to go well or to go poorly? And what could you have done differently next time you're in a similar situation? We want you to ask yourself, what did you learn from that experience? Okay. What insights did you gain? Is there relevance to genetic counseling? And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be relevant to the actual science of genetics. When we say relevant to the field of genetic counseling, we're talking about like core genetic counseling ideas. Again, advocacy, empathy, being non-judgmental, supporting autonomy. Those things relate to genetic counseling without being about the science, right? And big thought here, how will you use the information that you collected or the things you've been thinking about that experience? How does it change your way of thinking? How would it make you do things differently in the future? How does it change your perspective on life or your situation or other people's lives? Like that application of the knowledge and insight into changing your own behavior is super critical and very crucial. And if you can show that in your paper, super interesting, right, to people who are reading it. We also want to make sure that you are touching on any direct genetic counseling experiences that you've had, like shadowing or potentially informational interviews or anything that was directly related to genetic counseling, especially if you've done like crisis work. If you get through your whole paper without talking about your crisis work once, that's a little like, I'm going to raise my eyebrow. So we need to at least like mention that. But if you did not have a good experience in your crisis work, that's okay. Like, why? What was it about it that you didn't like? Was it someone else's crisis was really hard for me and I didn't enjoy being a part of that? That's really good feedback for you to have. It doesn't really fit with genetic counseling, right? So if you're feeling that way about your crisis work, then like consider that more, because that is a lot of what genetic counselors do, right? And so if that was extremely uncomfortable for you and something you didn't like, then is this the right career path? Maybe, maybe not. You might have to explore the nuances. Or was it, I did crisis text line and I really didn't like the remote part of it. Like I liked helping, but I didn't like not being able to see their reactions and see their thought processes. And that's okay, right? You can describe that. So whether you had a great experience in crisis work or a poor one or somewhere in the middle of the road, that's fine. We just want to describe it somehow and make sure that you are communicating what you learned from that experience about yourself and about the world. Okay. Okay. Let's keep going. We want to identify and define our strengths, also our weaknesses, and our values. How do we do this? Self-reflection, okay? It's not very comfortable to think about good things about ourselves, especially in the demographic of people who are usually going to be a genetic counselor, who tend to be less selfish and more focused outward on how they can help others rather than how great themselves are, right? So this can be an uncomfortable task, but you need to know how to identify the things that you're good at. And that's not being arrogant. That is just accepting, yeah, I worked hard on that and I can do it well. And yay, right? I'm still growing, but that's something I do well. That's okay. That is not arrogance. That is confidence. And that is what we're looking for. If you're really struggling on that, then I would ask the people in your life who love you the most, who respect you, who really know who you are. This is not a time when you're asking frenemies for their feedback. These are people that you feel confident and secure in your relationship with them, whether it is a family relationship, a professional relationship, a friend. That's fine. But you want to ask those people in your life, hey, what are some things that I'm really good at? Or when you think about me, what do you think of? Or if you had to describe me in a few words, how would you do that? And, you can ask people too, like, what do you think are my weaknesses? And again, that's not a very comfortable conversation to like have or to hear those things, but it's important that you're able to take that critical feedback, right? When it comes from a good place from someone you trust, because your entire grad school experience will be people giving you feedback and ways for you to improve. So time is now to get practice hearing about your weaknesses so that you can make them strengths, right? So that you know where to work. And it's actually really helpful to get that feedback so that you know how you're coming across to other people and you're more aware of yourself. Okay? Also, there are a variety of tools and assessments out there that you can use to identify your strengths, weaknesses, and values. We're going to try to make sure that Jess has time to get to one of those at the end here. But she's probably going to talk about Brene Brown and her resource as being like a great place for that. So we'll look forward to that one. Yep, there she is.
I'm eating, so that's why I have my camera off. So I'm
She
not
gave a thumbs up. Why? Why are we identifying those things? They will help you articulate who you are through your CV, your personal statement, and your interviews. If you do not believe in yourself, why should a school believe in you, right? So each of you have value. Each of you deserve to be here, right? It is not helpful for you to compare yourself to other applicants and think, oh, that other applicant is so more qualified than I am. I can't really compete. You don't know. You don't know all their stuff. You don't know everything about their grades or their experiences or how they are as a person or their personality. So it's not helpful to compare yourself to anyone else, and you don't have to, right? All you have to do is get across who you are and why we should be excited about you, right? And we can help you do that. Okay, let's continue here. We also want you to brainstorm on your future career goals. This isn't just, I want to use my genetic counseling skills to help people, right? Of course you do. That's what we're going to train you to do, right? As a program. But what these schools really want to see is how you want to deploy your degree to help or to like grow the field. So some people are really super into a specific specialty. Like I had a client a couple years ago who was like, I am cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs about prenatal and reproductive. I just love it so much. That's where I want to be. Wonderful. We used her paper to explain that and back that up, right? Other people don't have a specific emphasis or like a specialty that they want to go into, but they feel really strongly about one aspect. Like some people really love research, and so they want to use their genetic counseling degree to do research-based activities. Other people feel really strongly about policy making and leadership in that way. And so they're not as concerned right now about what specialty they're going to be in, but they really want to be involved in like NSGC leadership or policy making, and they're out to figure out how to right some wrongs in the field, right? So any of those types of things, totally fine to talk about. Those are a direction of how you're going to use your degree, and you can be as specific or non-specific as you'd like, but we want to see a direction, right? And no school is going to hold you to whatever you put in your paper. They're probably not going to go back and read your paper after you've matched, right? So they're not even going to remember what you wanted. But it shows that you have considered how you will make a difference in the field. It shows you have considered what you want from your life to make an impact. It shows that you have put in like a long-term thought process before approaching the field. Okay, so we want to make sure you definitely have some type of direction. Okay? We also want you to brainstorm on your genetic counseling journey. What led you here? How did you find out? What are your passions? What makes you a little nutty about genetics that you just kind of nerd out and push your glasses up? What is super exciting about this field to you? What's most appealing? What qualities of a genetic counselor are you embodying? Have you seen genetic counseling sessions or like shadowed them? Did they go well? Did they go poorly? Why? Right? What happened? And how would you have done it differently, essentially? Okay. So again, if you're able to do this like massive brainstorming and think about all of your ideas, you're going to have a lot to work with for your paper. And obviously you're not going to be able to put all of that in there, right? There's no way for you to put all of that in there. But if you have that all written down and described, you're going to start to see some themes, right, of all of your work and everything that you've done. And those themes are easy to incorporate into your paper and make it really coherent, like a coherent narrative all the way through. Okay. It's also easy to pick experiences that were really important to you, the ones that meant the most, the ones that you had the most to write about when you were brainstorming. Like those are the ones that are going to be like the best meat for your papers. Okay. And again, that was a lot that we just went through, but that video on how to write your statement of purpose and also another video on how to think about your crisis experience get super deep into these questions and help you really reflect on what did it mean? What did I take away from it? And so I'd highly recommend watching those videos so that you can go very deep into this, pulling insight from your experiences. Okay. Picking a core idea. So your goal in this kind of category is that the program is going to read your paper and they're going to associate you with one memorable idea, because being remembered is your goal, right? So what that looks like is, they read your paper and they get to the end of it and they set your paper down and they're like, wow, applicant Susie is fill in the blank, right? And you have control over what's in that blank. It has to be a simple idea though, okay? So we're picking a quality or a personality trait that you most want them to know about you. And if we can pitch that kind of at the beginning of your paper, work it in your conclusions to your experiences, and then again at the end of your paper, it's going to read very coherent and a really cohesive paper by the end, and they're going to be left with this core idea that you've given them about yourself. Okay? So how do we pick this? Again, once you've done your brainstorming, you're going to look at the experiences that meant the most to you. What are the common elements? What emotions or like concepts have motivated you through your life, right? Why do you think genetic counseling is for you? Is it a skill set that you've practiced? Is it like values that you have just lived by or have been taught to you by your family? It's been your family culture to have these kind of genetic counseling traits like empathy, like listening, right? And then of course your key personality traits, we want you to know what those are. And so again, asking trusted loved ones or trusted mentors or other people around you can help you know what those personality traits are if you're having trouble identifying them in yourself. Okay. Also, highly recommend getting help, right? Coaching can clarify common themes and reflect back at you the central ideas if you're having a hard time pinning them down. Like a couple of years ago, I had a client and we were kind of working through all her experiences. And at the end of the first session, it was really clear. I was like, look, you know how to do hard things. That is kind of the theme of what I'm getting from you. You have done amazingly hard things in your life And even though you know transitioning to genetic counseling is going to be hard, you have proof that you can do it because you've backed it up so many times before. And so her core idea was, I can do hard things, right? And we only got there because she had a coach kind of reflecting back at her what everything meant that she was telling, right? And so it doesn't necessarily have to be GC prep. It can be if you know a genetic counselor, if you have another person who's mentoring you, super, right? Work with them to help find what this core idea is. Here's what not to do. These are not good core ideas, okay? No, I want to help people. Of course you do, right? But it's too basic. We need to be more specific on why and or how, okay? Also, core idea shouldn't be, I love genetics. If you didn't, you wouldn't be here, right? So we need something that's more relevant to like genetic counseling in particular, right? Or that would be good for a genetic counselor rather than just like, I super love genetics because doctors can and researchers can and lab techs can. That's fine. We need something more detailed. Okay? Also, we don't want, I'm ready to be a genetic counselor because I have skill, and I saw 1,000 shadowing cases and I'm super passionate about blah, 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 blah. That's way too long. Okay. They're never going to get that core idea because it's too complicated. We want like a one-liner, less than 10-word concept, right, that they can get. So here are some real examples from people who have gotten multiple interviews and matched, and we coached all of these people, right? I can do hard things. We just talked about her, right? I know how to have hard conversations. I am passionate about medical justice. I am a grower, and I want to facilitate their choices, right? So all of those are very simple concepts and core ideas that were easy for them to work into their paper from beginning to middle to end. And so by the time we got to the end, we didn't need a full paragraph of conclusion. We needed just a one-liner that, again, drove that core idea home to finish up their paper. Okay? So each of these were really specific to the applicant, and they came about organically as we were discussing who they are and their experiences and their goals and the motivation. So you want to find what yours is rather than copy one of these, right? And if yours ends up being similar to one of these, that's fine. But we just want to make sure it is also specific to you. Okay, okay, let's talk about choosing a framework for your paper. There are really four that are most common, but I'm sure there are more out there. Again, we talk about these in much greater detail in that How to Write Your Statement of Purpose video on our website. But here's kind of the overview, okay? So one thing you could do is a strength-focused paper. So you're kind of describing what strengths that you embody that will help you succeed as a genetic counselor. So as you are describing your experiences, you're highlighting your strengths, right? And you're talking about like how you applied those strengths in that situation, and then commenting on how you think you will apply them as a genetic counselor, right? There are also weakness-focused papers, right? So it's not wrong to acknowledge where you've had failures or weaknesses in the past. That is okay, because it allows you to show your growth, right? We want to see, if you're going to go that route, we want to see like, how did you overcome those challenges? How did you get around that? Or how did you improve so that that wasn't an issue anymore? So essentially we're taking your weaknesses and you're reframing it into a strength. We're not, you know, this weakness focused paper is not, oh, I'm really bad at thing X and I'm still really bad at thing X. That's not what we're doing here. We're saying this was really hard for me. This is how I've grown. This is how I've improved. This is how I have worked to address it. And even though I'm still working on thing X, I am now significantly better at it than I used to be in the future, right? Perfect. Very interesting to schools, right? They are looking for people who are willing to learn because they have a lot to teach you, right? So showing that you can grow, showing that you can improve, show that you can work on things, excellent, right? Super. You could also take the approach where you're focusing really heavy on your crisis or shadowing work. And so that's usually a lot of introspective narrative. What did you learn? What were your insights? How does it apply to being a genetic counselor? Like those are the kind of questions that you're trying to answer in that crisis or shadowing focused paper. Okay? And then there are some people who had like a specific life event that kind of like triggered their journey into genetic counseling. And that could be like, your hook or your personal pivotal moment and the emotional reaction there. So was it a success? Was it a failure? Did someone in your family get diagnosed? Did someone have a diagnostic odyssey? Like, what was the pivotal moment when you realized like there was an issue and genetic counseling was part of the solution and you wanted to be part of that solution, right? So we want you to discuss in your paper, like, how did this lead to you starting your genetic counseling journey, and how do each of the things that you've experienced in the meantime support your goal, right? Or propel you down that path. Okay, describing your experiences. How do you do that actually? So this is actually in your paper when you're writing about them. How do you write about them? Because everything you wrote down for brainstorming is way too much, right? You can't take that text and plug it into your paper. You have to edit. So how do we do this in your paper? Here's the major pitfalls. We're not regurgitating your CV. That's boring, okay? We're not getting too hung up on describing facts. They don't care, right? They don't care specifically about what you did. They care about what you learned. And the reason for that is because all of you have different experiences. You've had different amounts of shadowing. You're coming from different backgrounds. The important part is not the indications of the patients you saw, right? It is what you took away from those experiences. And so it doesn't matter if you've shadowed one case or 50. If you've shadowed 50 and you can't describe insightfully what that meant to you, then it doesn't matter how many you've seen, okay? So the schools can really see who you are by your thought process, by your values, by what you were noticing, and that is what we want to write about in these papers. So how do you do it right? You want to make sure that you are bringing main character energy to all of your experiences that you're describing. So even if you're only observing an interaction, like if you shadowed a case and you said 0 words in that experience, that's fine, but you're still the main character for the purposes of this paper. So you're describing, this is what I felt, this is what I saw, this is what I realized, this is what I want to say, this is what I was concerned about. So that, again, can feel uncomfortable because we try to make our lives about other people, right? Most people who are drawn to the field of genetic counseling are trying to help others. So talking about yourself is not comfortable, but that is what this paper is about, okay? So I want you to describe these situations as if I were in your head watching it through your eyeballs, okay? So I'm in your brain, I'm feeling what you're feeling, I'm seeing what you're seeing, I'm noticing what you're noticing. I want you to describe it in those terms rather than, oh, I watched this scenario on TV and I, am just observing it from a distance. I don't want to know stuff from a distance. I want to know stuff from the perspective of being inside your brain. Okay? And if that analogy does not work for you, just like let it go. Some people get it, some people don't, but that's how I think of it, okay? So what all this means is when you're describing these experiences that you've had, we only want enough factual details for context. So usually that's like less than 20 to 30% of the description, in that paragraph is going to be facts. And the other 70 to 80% is going to be your analysis. What you were feeling and seeing and thinking, like that is the interesting part that schools want to know, okay? So with all of that, successes and failures, again, great to talk about, because if you did fail at something, you probably had an oh shit moment in your head where you realized it wasn't going well and you had to process that, right? Very valuable information for them to have about you. Okay? And so as you're describing these experiences, you're going to work in that core idea, right? That you've had about yourself that you want them to remember. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like every paragraph that you hit on it, but every other, something like that. You can work in that core idea as it relates to this experiences that you've had, okay? If you are able to do this effectively, it means you don't have to waste your word count on saying something like, in this way, I've showed my dedication to patient advocacy, so I'd be a good genetic counselor, because you've already proven that. And the proof is far stronger than just saying, that you've shown it, right? So you've actually put it into practice. Okay? How to start and end your paper with a bang. This is important. Okay, so we want an introduction hook. People who are reading your papers are human and they're tired. They're usually doing this in the evening after their whole day of work. They're usually reading like 5 to 10 other papers at the same time. They're tired. Sometimes they're bored, especially if they've read a number of kind of vague papers where people haven't explained who they are. Okay. So what you want is when they're starting to read your paper, that first introduction paragraph hooks them in right away. And I usually recommend starting with some type of story. It can be dramatic or poignant. It can be an impactful case. It can be that pivotal moment in your life. It can be a time when like a key genetic counseling skill or core value was really solidified in your mind. But basically you're jumping right in, like giving them a scenario right away where you are describing your thinking and feeling processes, right? So it doesn't have to be like a super dramatic event, right? Like a world-changing event. That's not what we're looking for, but we're looking for a time that was like dramatic for you, life-changing for you in a way that it made you think differently about the future or other people, right? If you're able to do that right up front, they're going to be way more focused and way more engaged with the rest of your paper than they were for the papers they read before yours, okay? And again, we want to bring that core idea, we want to introduce it in this opening paragraph. Okay, your final paragraph is typically going to be on why this school, why this particular program, and it's not because it's in a cool city and the cost is good, right? Those could be totally legitimate reasons to pick that school. I'm not saying they're not, and I absolutely recommend everyone consider, like critically consider how much debt they're taking on for school because woof. But for the purposes of describing why you want to go to that school, we're not saying location, we're not saying cost because those things are too basic, okay? What we are saying is what works well for you that school is offering. And so we want to relate what that school is offering to your needs and passions or learning styles, your interests, things that have already kind of been described in your paper because you've made it about who you are and what you're about as a person. So we need you to pick at least 2 things from a school that you gravitate towards. Is it like the vibe from the program leadership, or is it a focus on research or another specialty? Is it an opportunity to rotate at certain clinics or hospitals that you find particularly appealing? Is it the patient population that you're particularly interested in? Are there special offerings that you want to do? Like my program, we all went up for a week to volunteer at Camp Sunshine, which is a camp in Maine for kids and their families with severe genetic disorders, right? So we volunteered there. So that was a special offering. Is it the class size? Is it how they do rotations? Like there's tons of things that you can choose. And we actually have a whole video on how to pick schools that go through a bunch of different criteria on how to consider a school and how to consider for yourself what would be a good fit, right? Far more than just location and cost. So if you're really not sure how to consider these things, brainstorming all your experiences and finding those commonalities and finding your core values, and also learning how to consider those schools carefully is going to make that a lot easier. And then again, last sentence, we're wrapping up by bringing back that core idea into that just last sentence. It's usually the final sentence of your school paragraph. Okay. So what does this look like? Big picture as an outline. You have your hook intro. It's a story. It's going to introduce your core idea. Then we have a couple of body paragraphs. I put 3, but it doesn't necessarily have to be 3. It kind of depends on your word limit and how many experiences you're able to share. Again, we want to focus on you being the main character here. We want all words and descriptions that are what's going on in your body and mind to describe these situations, okay? We want to know, why is XYZ school right for me personally? And then we're going to put that conclusion which again is typically a single line at the end of that last paragraph. Okay. Okay. Some do's and don'ts, big picture. Don't ramble. Okay. That'll happen with your first draft. That's fine. We're just going to refine it. Okay. We do not want to try too hard with our words or add too much fluff. Okay. We want to use some genetic counseling terms like advocacy and autonomy, informed consent, like things like that, totally fine to use. And we want to show that you do have those words, but we don't want to overload your paper with so many of those that it feels contrived, right? Or it doesn't feel genuine anymore because it's so packed with terms rather than like authentic how you would talk about something. Okay. Also, we're not giving too many details about a case or a research or a testing thing because again, the details are not what they're looking for. They want to know what you learned. Okay? There's also absolutely no room for fluff in any of these papers because you have a word limit or a page limit. And if you're not reaching that with your content, then you need help getting more content because you've had plenty of experiences. There's plenty to talk about to fill up all your space. So we don't want to add lines and sentences that actually don't say much because they're not going to help you at all. Okay. We're not regurgitating our CV. Okay. And we're not falling into this. What do I think they want to hear? So I'll tell them everything that I know. Like that's not helpful. If they want to know about your experiences and what you've done in a list form, they're going to go look at your CV. Your paper is for getting into the meat of why they were relevant and important to you. Okay. We also don't want to get too detailed about deeply traumatic experiences. And what I mean by deeply traumatic is like assault, right? In its many forms. We don't want to get into like suicidal ideology, really, like things that are like really deeply traumatic. Now, if you've had other events that were very challenging for you and were hard for you at the time, like the passing of a loved one or like a massive setback in your life, or if someone experienced homelessness, for example, those are okay to talk about, right? If you're comfortable doing that. And being vulnerable in your paper can be highly beneficial, but we don't want to get into anything that's like disturbing, if that makes sense. Okay. Okay. So do's, do look at the prompts. Okay. Most schools are going to have the same kind of asks, which again are, who are you? Why do you want to be a genetic counselor? And why do you think you're ready for that? And why do you like our school? Like those are, in general, the 3 questions that most schools want to know, but some of them have unique prompts. Some of them have additional prompts. So you want to make sure you're really answering the question and you want to be mindful of your word limit. There are some schools who will copy and paste your text and put it into a box that will restrict how many characters are shown. So going over the word limit could end up in you getting part of your answer removed. Okay. So be mindful of those word and length limits. Okay? We want you to look at things through the lens of a genetic counselor when writing and refining your application materials, which is a lot of like the social stuff. How did it affect me? How did it affect them? How did it affect their interactions with the medical field? What does that mean for their future? That type of thing. Okay. We want you to find ways to make connections with the schools you're applying to. If you can, attend their open houses, meet their second years. If possible, we want you to do that like brainstorming, even if it's just word vomit, right? To like just prep and get everything out of your brain onto paper so you can see it and start to organize that. Being vulnerable and genuine and sharing your story is what makes someone stand out. It is what makes a paper memorable. That's hard to do. And I've had clients that really struggle to share anything personal about themselves, and they struggled come interview time and come match time. That was a struggle because again, the school didn't really know who they were because they weren't let beyond that wall to kind of see who they were as a person. Your lived experiences are extremely valuable. That's what they're after. That's what they want to know. And then, of course, get help, right? It's hard to do this on your own, right? It's hard to know what's going to succeed. It's hard to know if you're like hitting things properly. It's hard to know like how a genetic counselor would really think about this if you're not a genetic counselor yourself. And so that's where getting help from another genetic counselor like us, or if you have a mentor or someone you've been shadowing that can help you, then those people are going to be able to help you interpret your experience in a way that a genetic counselor would see it and help show the program that you're ready. Okay. So again, coaching, why would you do that? Same things we just discussed. It helps you pick that core idea in your framework. It helps you dig deeper into those insights, helps you navigate the wildly different word count requirements, right? So typically what this looks like in practice with our clients is if we do some document reviews, what our goal is to get them to like a base paper that's about 1,000 words, okay? Because that works for most schools. And that is going to be like their long version of their paper. They feel really good with it. And then when they have prompts that are like 500 words, we're looking at the prompt and then picking what parts of that long paper we can use to feed into this 500-word prompt. And so it just makes that process of editing it down a lot easier. If you have a really solid, like long version, then it's easy to pick and choose what stays, what goes for the shorter prompts. Okay. Also, the emotional support in this application process really can't be overstated. Just knowing that you have a cheerleader and someone on your side and a place to get help and knowing you're not doing it alone is massive. And a lot of people do much better work and feel much more confident in their work when they know they're on the right track because they've had it reinforced to them by someone who knows what they're doing, that everything's going well, right? Or if they're off track, how to course correct. Because sometimes you realize this is bad. I don't like what I've written. I have no idea how to fix it. And that's the hard part, not knowing how to fix it and get a good paper, right? So a coach can help you know how to get back on track. Okay. So at GC Prep, how do we do that, right? We have document reviews or a package of document reviews, which we call a limited series, where you're kind of getting like continuous feedback and working on it. There is long-term mentorship, which is you and a coach who is a genetic counselor and a certified life coach. So they have all those like exercises that they can help you find your values and strengths and weaknesses and kind of give you a more holistic guidance experience. Coach Jess is one of those individuals that works with us. There are small groups for people who just want touch points. They're like, I'm more of a loner. I'm more going to do this on my own, but I just want to like check in every once in a while to know that I am on track. And we have one small group on CVs coming up, and then another one that's actually put on by a program director on statement of purpose. And so those are small, only up to 6 people. So you have time to get a little bit of feedback that's personal to you and hear personal feedback to other people, which can be helpful for improving yours as well. Okay. If you need help deciding if and what kind of coaching you want, then you can book a free orientation. They're like 15 or 30 minutes. They're with me, no obligation at all. We just talk about who you are, how you're coming to this application process, and what help you think you need. And you can leave those sessions and do absolutely nothing after that, and that's totally fine. Or you can explore, what the various coaching options would look like and what you need, and meet some of our coaches if you decide to move forward. But there's absolutely no obligation to proceed. So you can find that on our website either by going to this link, or you can go to our website and then like coaching services and book coaching, and it's under like one-on-one offerings, right? You can book those free orientations, or you can just email me. The support at gcprepllc.com comes directly to me. I answer those. And so I'm happy to answer questions or get you set up with one of those free orientations just to answer any questions more specifically. Okay. Okay. We are now on to our values exercise. So I'll turn it over to Coach Jess. And Jess, do you want me to drop in this link with the values exercise, the Dare to Lead list of
Have it?
values? Yeah, I do have it here.
Yeah. Cool.
Unless you have it. Hold on.
Yeah, you can drop it in if you want to. I know I see some of my boot campers on here too. So this will be a repetitive exercise for my campers. As Michaela mentioned earlier, I am a certified life coach, and this was something that I was trained in coaching. And I wish I had this when I was applying to schools because it really helps put language behind who I am. And hopefully we'll do language through who you are. Our values really drive a lot of our motivations, our behaviors, our actions. And it's kind of like our genetic code, but more of like our moral code. Everything that we do comes from and stems from our values. And so through this exercise, I found it to be very grounding to be able to put words and articulate who we are, not just as a person, but also in the world of genetic counseling and how our values can relate to that. So Michaela mentioned Brene Brown. She also has a values exercise, and she has it very nicely put on this PDF that Michaela just shared with you. If you don't know who Brene Brown is, I dropped in her TED Talk. She does something on power vulnerability, but she describes herself as a researcher, a storyteller, and somebody who's been studying courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy the last, I can't even tell you how many number of years. And so with this exercise, you can download the PDF, or you can just go online and look at all of the different values. Do not be overwhelmed. There are a lot. We will refine them, just as you do with your paper in your application materials, right? We'll go from a big picture idea to getting down to the really things, the real core values that are most genuine and true to who you are. So the way that this is going to work is it's a three-step process. What is going to happen at the beginning is I want you all to take the opportunity to just kind of look at this list, and I want you to identify all of the values that you really connect with. This is kind of like those personality tests. Like, don't spend too much time thinking about one word. If it clicks with you, then jot it down. You can jot it down if you download the PDF. Sometimes you can highlight it. If you are taking notes on the computer, you can type them in, copy and paste them. You can write them down on a piece of paper. But the way that this will work is I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock, and you will go forward and just identifying what those values are. Now, there's a range. It can be anywhere from 10 to 34. I was just working with somebody earlier that they're like, I had like over 30, and they were insecure about it. Don't worry about it. We will refine them. And I want to make note too of the very bottom right-hand corner, there's some space to add your own values. So if you don't see something on here that clicks with you, but you have another word that you want to add, you can also add that. So I'll start the clock at 3 minutes, and I would like all of you to just take the time again to just identify the values that you connect with.
And can you guys see the list is on the screen now, right? Or is it still the PowerPoint?
It's on the screen.
No, okay, just making sure. Doesn't quite all.
We don't have Janelle on here to play the background music. Here's a good, like, very relevant song. The Greatest Showman. Can you hear it? So this is me. This is real. This is background music while 3 minutes goes.
I wanna love you as you are, but I won't let them break you down. 'Cause I know that there's a place for us. Oh, we are glorious. Wanna touch you down to the skin. Wanna drown around. I am great. I am free. I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. So look here I go. I'm scared to be seen. I'm ignored. This is me. We're about at the minute mark, so another minute or so.
So many good ones on here.
What was that?
So many good ones on here.
I know. Okay. Michaela, you should do this too.
I should do it too. I haven't actually like done it. I've seen this multiple times and I haven't actually like written them down. I think for me, the ones that really stick out are like the authenticity,
Mhm.
integrity, um, and connection.
Mhm.
Like those are the ones that kind of like stick out to me just off the bat.
Mhm.
But of
Yeah.
course, many others are very important, right?
Yeah.
As well. And if I were to make a long list, it would include many more.
Yeah. So within that 3 minutes, again, a list is generated, right? You could have 10, you could have 30, it doesn't matter where you're at with how many you have. What the next step of this is, normally I'll ask how the process is, but for sake of time, we'll just kind of like move through this all together. The next step of this process now is I want you all to look at the values that you have, and I want you to start organizing them into how they relate to each other. So kind of think about it as putting them in little buckets, right? For example, one of my values is joy. And a lot of the things that fall under joy is family and community and fairness and things that make me feel joyful, right? So we're going to kind of categorize them into how they relate to each other, and you're putting them in these little buckets. As you continue to refine these values, I want you to start noticing the ones, Michaela was just talking about that kind of just stick out to you. Just keep those in the back of your mind. So I'm going to do another 3 minutes on the clock. We'll put some Greatest Showman on so you can just have some background music. And then we'll meet together for the last step of this process.
Gonna send a prayer, gonna drown around. This is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be. This is me.
Still have a little bit more time. About a minute left. And as Michaela mentioned, we're about at the hour mark, so if anybody needs to leave, go ahead. That's okay. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll answer them, and this will be recorded and will be posted up on our website.
I will stay. I will stay with you. We'll make it to the other side, like lovers do. I'll reach my hands out in the dark and wait for yours to enter like feel.
Was this for all of our reapplicants? I'm not giving up, no, not yet. Okay, so it's about 3 minutes. And- Okay. So the last part of this exercise is I want you all to now choose your top 3 and identify your top 3 core values. I will only put a minute on the clock. It won't seem like enough time, but this is really where I don't want you to think too much. I just want you, those words that feel very natural to you, I like to say, or that you vibe with, that you feel like you can speak confidently on behalf of when you're talking about who you are. Those are the words that I want you to choose. So with 1 minute on the clock, please identify your top 3 core values. All right, so that is the end of the values exercise. I know we didn't get a chance to kind of go over what this process was like for all of you. It's varied based off of the person and selecting them. Sometimes it's challenging, sometimes it's really easy. But I hope now you all have a little bit more of an idea of like innately like who you are as a person. And my challenge for you is to now relate your values to genetic counseling. Ask yourself these questions, and this was actually at one of the very beginning slides, is how do they relate to the genetic counseling profession as a whole? How do they relate to the programs that you're applying to? How do they maybe relate to some of your career goals, maybe as a student or as a practicing genetic counselor? And how do they relate to how you plan on making a difference in the genetic counseling world? I truly encourage all of you, once you've identified these values, to take some time to just reflect on those questions and stay true to those values throughout the rest of this application process. That's what Michaela was saying earlier, was like, your unique qualities and who you are is really what's going to set you apart. And live consistently and congruent with your values so you can really speak more authentically about who you are and really stand out amongst the rest of the cookie cutter individuals that are like, I love science and I love people. Now you have some language to put behind what you truly, truly respect and value, and maybe weave some of those into your application materials.
Thank you so much, Jess. I completely agree. Okay. So that's a wonderful exercise. It's that information that's gonna make you memorable. Please utilize it.
And if you want to drop your values into the chat, that would be awesome if you are comfortable with that.
Yeah. So again, that's Coach Jess. She does, document reviews and limited series, but she also does long-term mentorship. So if you're looking for like really holistic coaching, that's Jess. When I describe her to people, I say, imagine a golden retriever became a person, and you kind of have Coach Jess, which fits with your kind of like key value of joy. We have another coach, her name is Jessa, and I kind of describe her as like really deep, still waters. So she's really great for people who have a lot of anxiety about the process and need like a calm, safe space to hold them. So we have just wonderful, wonderful coaches to help you on your way. And I see, Tasneem, you had your hand up. If that is on purpose, sometimes it just
Yes.
does its thing on its
Well,
own.
first of all, thank you so much for organizing this. That was very helpful.
Great.
The second question, well, the first question I have is, I often hear people asking or telling us to talk about experiences with crisis or advocacy, but I'm struggling to know, how do we talk about this in our application or like statement while covering other topics or like prompts that the programs already ask? Because I feel it's challenging to cover everything with
Yeah.
the word limit.
Yeah. And let that go. You won't be able to cover everything, unfortunately, right? When you're talking about your crisis work or advocacy experience, the kind of knee-jerk reaction, or what I see most in like people's drafts that they're submitting to us at the beginning of their coaching cycle, kind of describes it as, yeah, I help these kind of people in this type of setting, and this is what I learned. And that method really doesn't tell us anything about them as a person. And so what I usually recommend for describing your crisis work or your advocacy work is picking like one particular instance where you had a meaningful interaction. And it could be meaningful in whatever way. So maybe you like totally failed that interaction, but it was that experience of failure there that helped you do it correctly and help other people in the future. Super. Like, or maybe you really didn't know what to do and you were in this kind of like deer in headlights moment, and you had to kind of work through it. And you learned how to move through those like moments of uncertainty, or get comfortable with the discomfort of not knowing what to do. Usually it's a paragraph, right? So if the prompt is not, if none of the school's prompts are specifically asking you about your crisis work, then you want to look at the prompts that are the most relevant to that. Like if there's a question, why do you think genetic counseling's for you? That's where you put it, right? It's one of the paragraphs that you're covering, right? And the reason why you're prioritizing an experience from your crisis work is because genetic counselors deal with other people's crises all the time, right? So that crisis work is not only for you to know if this is the type of work that you would enjoy long-term, but also for a school to know that you've had experience and that you've learned how to like move through that freeze up moment and just the analysis paralysis and really not being able to help at all because you maybe just feel so bad for someone in their particular situation, or you're just paralyzed with fear of not knowing how to make it better or how to help them, right? We want to see attempts to improve, attempts to help. So that's why we're saying prioritize at least one paragraph about an instance in your crisis or advocacy work in at least one of your responses. Make sense? Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yes,
there we go.
thank you so much. That makes absolute sense. I appreciate your answer.
Yeah, no problem. We had another question from Mary. So for coaching, what's the difference between unstructured time and document review? Perfect question. Unstructured time, we can go over whatever you want, right? You might not even have a paper yet, but you're just like, I brainstormed and it's overwhelming. How do I like make an outline? We can talk about whatever you want, but it's that 45 minutes. That's what you get. We do no prep ahead of time. We just kind of show up and see what you want to talk about. A document review, you're purchasing an hour and a half of genetic counselor time. So 45 minutes ahead of our appointment at some point, we are reviewing your paper and your CV, and we are developing feedback, and we are kind of like just brainstorming on our end what you could do to improve, how we want to change this. So we're really doing a lot of like mental work on what kind of guidance we're going to give. And then there's a 45-minute session where we meet on a video and talk about all that feedback and work together on how to make your paper better. So again, unstructured time, show up and let's see what happens, right? How do you want to use the time? And a document review is you're purchasing an hour and a half, and half of that is us brainstorming feedback specific for you and your paper. Okay, next questions. Let's see. Oh, Jess posted a couple more reflection questions that are great. So take a look at that one. Do you have tips for how to separate personal statements and statements of purpose? I'm applying to a couple of schools that want both. This is so annoying that they want that. Yes, so statement of purpose, these statements of purpose, however you want to make that plural, are what most schools are asking for. And so they're going to be about like the who are you, why genetic counseling, why us type, everything that we kind of focused on. And personal statements allow you to get deeper into who you are as a person, right? So with a statement of purpose, you're kind of using your experiences to show both why you would be good as a genetic counselor and a little bit about yourself. And a personal statement is more like I am focused on myself, describing my background, describing where I'm coming from, describing like the values that are important to me, more specifically expounding on them in a little bit more detail. That there will be significant overlap, right? If you have to write both, okay? So don't feel like you have to have 100% brand new content for each. That's not very realistic. But like I've had a couple of clients over the years who discuss in their paper their own path to a genetic diagnosis or the path of a family member to a genetic diagnosis. And typically in their statements of purpose, we're only getting enough details to understand like their emotional response to that situation, right? And then going from there, that launches like how they interpreted and how they got started on the rest of like genetic counseling. For a personal statement, they would kind of describe more of like, this was my experience with that. This is how it shaped me as a person. This is how it really like showed up in my life. This is the benefits from that experience. These are kind of like the downsides. You know, that would be one method of approaching it. So you're just going into more detail and some of the more nuances of who you are as a person and how you tick. Whereas a personal statement or a statement of purpose is really aimed at like, okay, you, but as it relates to the values of genetic counseling and your trajectory on your career. So your statement of purpose, again, it needs to have a direction for your career path. That could be a specialty. It could be a type of area like research or something else, clinical or whatever. It could be a goal, right? Any of those things would be fine. You don't necessarily need a trajectory in your personal statement.
Kind of like, what is your purpose of being here? You know, why are you here? Almost like I kind of see it sometimes like a cover letter. Like it's like there's a purpose behind your cover letter when you're just kind of, you know, generally talking about like why you're interested in a particular job just as much as why you interested in this school and why are you interested in genetic counseling.
Yeah, absolutely. Tips for supplemental prompts. Approach them in the same ways, right? So all the tools and methods and everything that we discussed here in this webinar tonight, deploy those same tools and methods to writing your supplemental prompts, okay? So again, what you did is far less important than how you did it and what you were thinking and feeling when you did it and what you observed other people's reactions and experiences were in that situation. And oftentimes, like I know, I think it's Columbia has like 4 prompts that are 500 words each. And you can essentially take like main chunks of your like core statement of purpose and just tweak them a little bit to fit well into those prompts. You might have to write some new stuff. Like some schools have a prompt on diversity. Like I think Boston,
Most
at least
do.
last year, it was like
Almost all of them.
exceptional care without exception. What does that mean to you? Like that's their hospital's stuff, right? And so then you're kind of writing a diversity statement. So you really want to pull from your own life, right? Like a lot of people have experience with like racial diversity. And that is certainly a very important like avenue to explore diversity. Other people might have diversity in their like religious background, and that has othered them in some ways in certain situations. Other people might have diversity in like their family structure growing up or their general, you know, culture or any number of things, right? Their educational experience. So there are a lot of different ways to approach diversity. There are a lot of different ways that society manages to other people. And part of being a genetic counselor is being able to consider what those differences are and how what you consider normal may not be normal for actually most other people in the world, right? And so they're trying to see with those like diversity statements is how do you notice times when your normal is not true for someone else, and what do you do in those situations? Because far too often in the world, the way that people respond to that is like anger or dismissing it. And that is absolutely not what genetic counseling is about, right? We're trying to embrace different values and viewpoints and experiences. We're trying to create a safe space for them. We're trying to consider how someone else's viewpoint could be beneficial and valuable to them, even if it is off-putting to us. So how can you hold your truth, your reality, your values in your mind while also helping someone who might be on the total opposite end of what you think is important and just kind of reject everything that you think is good, right? How do you help them? So that's kind of what they're getting at with those diversity questions and statements. And so experiences like anytime that your personal values or truths were challenged and it made you reflect on that are good ones to share.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that too. Sometimes it might be challenging. I will speak for myself, but I am a white middle class female, right? That for me, when I say here racial diversity, I don't have personal experience, religious diversity, all of that stuff. So I want to also just share that. I think that, and some of the prompts also say this specifically, that there's also diversity within your perspective in the experiences that you have. So, to just kind of tag along with what Michaela was saying, right? Has there been times and experiences when maybe your values, have clashed with others, and how do you respond in those those situations? Or have you observed some sort of, discrepancy in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in some of your own personal life experiences, your professional experiences, that now having a new perspective of watching the way that this interaction happened, what will you do with that now taking this forward? So diverse perspectives are also included in this if you're really struggling with trying to figure out like how, how are you diverse in some way, shape, or form?
Thank you. Other questions? Just more on those like supplemental prompts, like making sure like if you're able to stick to the format of keeping like the situational details to a minimum and focusing on your experiences or like what was going on in your brain, and what you saw other people's emotional reactions to the situation being, that will help you so much to pack a lot of high value, high yield content into a shorter amount of words.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? And I'm always available at support@gcprepllc.com. You can always schedule like a mentorship orientation or limited series orientation. Again, they're free. We can just talk about coaching if you're exploring that, no obligation. But we are here to help you and assist you. I started this company because it's frustrating to not know how to succeed at something you really care about. And I feel like that is the situation with applying to student counseling school, right? The instructions are so vague, it's hard to know if you're doing it correctly and effectively. And that shouldn't stand in the way of someone achieving their dreams. So we can help you, we can get you there. Let us know if you have any questions. But even if it's not with us, I recommend you finding a support person or a mentor that can help you through this process, because it will be so much better for you, both like in content and emotionally, to have that support system. Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming. Again, this has been recorded. We'll post it on the website in the coming days, and I'll send out an email when it's posted to our website and our YouTube page. But reach out if you have any questions. Take care, you guys.
Thank you.